Well, the left's coordinated efforts at lawfare against former President Trump continues as the criminal prosecution in New York City enters its third week. Now, this comes just after the Supreme Court heard oral arguments last week in a case regarding presidential immunity. And as prosecution from Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis and Special Counsel Jack Smith continue, with President Biden continuing to insist that democracy is on the ballot in the 2024 election, how should we respond to the anti-democratic lawfare that is taking over our courts? Joining me now to discuss this is Mike Davis, founder of the Article 3 Project. Previously served in all three branches of government, including as chief counsel for nominations to Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley in the Department of Justice during the George W. Bush administration, and staff of the Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Mike, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to start, there's so many different pieces out there. I'd like to get kind of an overview of how the left is using this lawfare against President Trump, the cases that are out there, and kind of a status on them.
So these Democrat prosecutors waited 30 months when they figured out that Trump was running for election again. They brought this unprecedented lawfare and election interference on many different fronts. There are 5 different criminal indictments now with Arizona, the Arizona AG, this Democrat AG in Arizona who literally stole the election in Arizona because the Democrats disenfranchised Republican voters on election day, and they haven't counted 9,000 ballots. This Democrat AG just brought another criminal indictment against several of Trump's former aides and lawyers and supporters. She named Trump as an unindicted co-conspirator. So now we have 4 criminal cases where Trump is named as a defendant, one where he's an unindicted co-conspirator. You have New York Attorney General Tish James, who brought a civil fraud lawsuit for Trump for the non-fraud of paying back sophisticated Wall Street banks in full, on time, as agreed, with interest. You had Jean Carroll bringing a bogus defamation case against Trump. This is lawfare on many fronts, and it is coordinated by President Biden, his White House, and his Justice Department, and there's evidence of that. There's evidence that President Trump's fingerprints are on all 4 of these criminal indictments through Jonathan Sue, his deputy White House counsel, who orchestrated and green-lighted the Mar-a-Lago raid, which led to Jay Bratt and Jack Smith's 2 criminal indictments against Trump for presidential records he's allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act, and the January 6th indictment. You have Nathan Wade billing his time 16 hours at $250 an hour, Fulton County DA, Fani Willis's boyfriend / special prosecutor, who billed his time to meet with the Biden White House, including the Biden White House counsel, before Fani Willis brought her unprecedented indictment against Trump. And then you have Matthew Colangelo getting deployed from the number 3 office, a senior Justice Department appointee deployed from the Biden Justice Department to Soros-funded Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg's office to bring the felony charge up there for settling a nuisance claim, which is not a felony. And they had to come up with a bogus legal theory passed over by the prior Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, the Manhattan U.S. Attorney, the Federal Election Commission, and Alvin Bragg himself, until Biden sent Colangelo.
Mike, you just said a lot, and I don't even know where to start with that. Other than this, do you have a chart that lays out these connections? Back in many years ago, I worked in anti-terrorism, and as it's asymmetrical, we would have to draw out the connections, and we would show the links after going through several layers. This sounds intriguing. Would make a great chart to see all of these connections that lead back to President Biden.
Yeah, I mean, President Biden's fingerprints are directly on all 4 of these criminal prosecutions. Look, this is a criminal conspiracy by President Biden, his White House staff, his Attorney General, his Justice Department, and these Democrat AGs in New York and Arizona, and these Democrat DAs in New York City and Fulton County, Georgia. This is a criminal, and also some lawyers on the outside who are coordinating with these government officials. This is a criminal conspiracy against rights. They are violating the civil rights of President Trump, his co-defendant Walt Nada, his 18 co-defendants in the Georgia case, These defendants in Arizona, this is a criminal conspiracy to violate their civil rights for the purpose of interfering in the election. And there are going to be severe consequences legally, politically, and financially.
So, Mike, let me ask you this question. I'm going to ask you right now to kind of, this is speculation. This would be speculation on your part. So I'm just putting that out there clear so everybody understands that. If Trump were not running for president, if somehow someone else had secured the nomination for the Republican slot for president, would this be going on? Would they have dropped all these cases?
There's no chance this would be happening. They waited 30 months to bring these unprecedented indictments. They tried to time these trials back to back to back in 2024 during the heat of the presidential campaign. They wanted President Trump stuck in a courtroom like they've done in New York City with this Democrats Manhattan DA, Juan Merchan, who donated to Trump in 2020, donated to another anti-Trump cause whose adult daughter, Lauren Merchan, has raised $100 million off of her father's unprecedented criminal trial. They're working with Soros-funded DA Alvin Bragg, Matthew Colangelo from the Biden Justice Department. This is obviously a criminal conspiracy with these prosecutors, judges, witnesses, lawyers on the outside running this lawfare like Andrew Weissman and many others. And there has to be severe legal, political, and financial consequences come January 20th, 2025.
So Mike Davis, let me ask you this question. Is the left this is so blatant. It's so blatant, as you just laid it out. It doesn't take a whole lot to see that this is coordinated, how they're hammering Trump, trying to keep him from being the next president. Is this going to backfire on them from the standpoint of the American people seeing through this? And actually, we see it in the polls that it appears to be helping Donald Trump, even though he's not out there campaigning.
Well, I hate being modest, but the Article 3 project has done over 3,000 media hits over the last 21 months. Since the Mar-a-Lago raid, we've done constant social media. We've done opinion pieces. We have been the tip of the spear against this lawfare and election interference against President Trump, and we have turned lemons into lemonade. After the Mar-a-Lago raid, there weren't a lot of people, particularly Republican lawyers, who were defending Trump. Now the rats are swimming back to the ship because it looks like this lawfare is backfiring spectacularly on these Democrats, including President Biden. It's going to propel President Trump back into the White House. And I don't think that's what the Democrats intended, but the Article 3 project had a hand in this.
Well, I'm prompted to ask, has the FBI knocked at your door? You seem to be a threat to exposing what the deep state is doing.
Well, I dare them. I will gladly go to jail before I go silent. There's no way they're going to gag me. There's no way they're going to imprison me. We have to make sure that this election is free and fair. And we're going to have the American people, not these Democrat prosecutors and Democrat judges and Democrat witnesses and Democrat operatives and these Democrat hellholes like New York, D.C., and Atlanta pick our president. The Supreme Court is on the line. Our God-given rights to speak, to worship, to protect ourselves are on the line. If you think the COVID lockdowns and the BLM riots were bad in 2020, wait for the Hamas riots in 2024. Vote as early as possible. Bank your vote so you're not scared to vote on election day, because the Democrats have proven they will do whatever it takes to win, including trying to put their leading presidential candidate in prison, to die in prison rather than to face him on November 5th, 2024.
Wow. Really good advice. We've been encouraging to do the same, not necessarily because I saw the Hamas pandemic coming this way, but I know there's going to be something that they roll out to try to mimic what we saw with the COVID virus. So building on that, Mike Davis, what should we be watching for? What should the American public be watching for and be prepared for?
Well, I would say this: the Supreme Court is almost certainly going to, by the end of June, going to rule in the Fisher case for the other January 6 defendants that the Biden Justice Department contorted, politicized, and weaponized a post-Enron obstruction of justice statute that relates to corporate fraud. and weaponized it against political enemies, including President Trump and his supporters on January 6th. Two of the four charges against President Trump in the January 6th case by Jack Smith are likely going to be going away after the Supreme Court rules on the Fisher case, or severely curtailed. And then the Supreme Court's going to rule, almost certainly going to rule, that the President of the United States, any President of the United States, is immune from criminal prosecution for his official acts, not his personal acts, his official acts. And that's going to, the Supreme Court's going to remand that case to the D.C. District Court, D.C. Obama Judge Thomas Shucken, for an evidentiary hearing. The bottom line is this New York City Bragg case, this dog of a case in New York, may be the only case that gets to trial before the election. The American people are going to put President Trump back in the White House on November 5th, 2024, and come January 20th, 2025, when he is sworn in, there are going to be severe legal, political, and financial consequences for this Democrat lawfare and election defense. These are Republic-ending tactics by the Democrats, and there must be consequences.
I want to ask you a question about the J6 cases, but first, you mentioned New York, and I want to kind of, since that is the one that many think will go forward, did they create this crime to come after President Trump? I mean, this appears to be unprecedented in what they're doing in New York. Is that correct?
Absolutely. They have taken bookkeeping misdemeanors that are time barred, meaning beyond the statute of limitations at best. Essentially, President Trump allegedly paid off a nuisance claim in 2016, like he's done many times in the past, like rich businessmen do many times. You pay off nuisance claims, you have them settle a non-disclosure agreement. That is routine. I was a real lawyer for many years, and I settled those nuisance claims on behalf of clients every week, right? It is routine to do that. And somehow this Alvin Bragg, the Soros-funded Manhattan DA, has brought the first felony indictment, the first indictment ever against a former president based upon a bogus legal theory that somehow President Trump's settlement of this nuisance claim in 2016, and he booked it in 2017 after the election, somehow that was a campaign finance violation that somehow transformed these misdemeanors that are time barred into felonies that are not. After you throw in COVID and extending the statute of limitations for that, they waited 7 years to go to trial on this bogus legal theory, again, passed over by the prior Manhattan DA, the Manhattan U.S. Attorney, the Federal Election Commission, and now, Bragg himself.
He didn't spend campaign money, but they say that it helped his campaign, therefore it was a campaign donation. Is that correct?
That's right. He spent his own personal money. Right, he didn't even spend business money. It came out of one of his trusts. It's personal money. It's not campaign money. This is a completely bogus theory.
Right.
Look, this is not going to be upheld by the courts, even if it has to go to the Supreme Court of the United States. This is their weakest, dumbest case. This is like when they ran the Michael Avenatti and Julie Swetnick allegations against Kavanaugh, when they brought their 6 bogus allegations against him. This is the dumbest, worst of their cases.
Mike, we probably don't have time to get a full answer to this, but back to the J6, we got about 30 seconds. The J6 prisoners, if the court rules, will we see many of those cases thrown out?
They should be thrown out, but you're already hearing these Democrat judges and even Republican judges and prosecutors saying that they're going to come up with novel ways to essentially ignore the Supreme Court's ruling by running consecutive sentences instead of the routine concurrent sentences. These judges need to be slapped down hard by the Supreme Court.
Well, Mike, I'm going to explore that further with you because I think that's a travesty of what we've seen, the weaponization of our own government against our people. Mike Davis, always great to see you. Thank you so much for helping shine light on this.
Thank you.